When governmental oversight fails, allowing drug manufacturers and food producers to be less than fully transparent.
This is ACIP. So this is the Advisory Committee on Immunizations. For those that weren't watching the video version of our podcast, essentially, what was the resultant vote? 100%. Everybody was in favor. Yet, let me just briefly touch upon the things that they mentioned. They were asking about adjuvants. These are things that are put into the vaccine essentially to stir up your immune system. Okay. And they said, oh, and they were asking about whether or not this is used in Europe. And they said, as far as we know, no, it's not. Oh, so the people in Europe aren't being exposed to this, but in the US, no, we're too dumb. Let's just
You should give it to kids.
Yeah, let's just give this to all our kids, no problem. That's number one. And remember, these are people supposed to be in a committee protecting us. Number two, they said, what about giving multiple vaccines, different kinds of vaccines? What about doing that? And at the same time, on the same day, the same visit to the doctor. And the answer is, we don't really know. We haven't really studied it, but the recommendation is they're going to give it in each arm. Now, let me ask you, you have children. When they went to get vaccinated, did the doctor give the vaccines in the same arm, or did they put one in the right arm, one in the left arm, one in the right leg, one in the left leg?
Usually it's in the same place, or many of the vaccines are already combined. To be honest, my kids don't get that many vaccines, and they are remarkably healthy, thankfully. But yeah, it doesn't matter. It's the same body. It's especially
So
with this tiny body. Like, how much of a difference is the arms going to make, really?
let
It's
me,
all
this is why it's very important, actually, because it's the interaction. And these people on that committee know better. The interaction between the different vaccines, that if you're sticking them all together, I have 2 cats that have died from this. And if you have a pet, a dog or a cat, the recommendations actually are the same for your dog and cat. When they go get vaccinated, they're supposed to give the vaccines in each of the legs. That's not what they do. And the reason they do it is to keep the vaccines separate. And if there's a reaction, it's from which vaccine. That doesn't typically happen. The veterinarians typically just put them all in the same place. So that's where that's coming from. And the other concern is, and we'll probably be hearing this on the news in the next few months, they used to use mercury as one of the adjuvants. That's not being banned in the United States, but aluminum is
Yeah, they
being
still
used.
use aluminum.
And that's probably my guess, hearing some of the RFK camp, I think that's going to be banned. And if that does happen, that may open the door to litigation against the drug manufacturers. But to put things in perspective, we remember during COVID, all the numbers they were telling us and all the things they were saying about efficacy and really the dangers of COVID. To put things in perspective as to how the drug makers themselves lie to us, let's watch this next clip.
Pfizer reported that its vaccine shows a 95% efficacy. That sounds like it protects you 95% of the time, right? But that's not actually what that number means. That 95% refers to the relative risk reduction, but it doesn't tell you how much your overall risk is reduced by vaccination. For that, we need absolute risk reduction. In the Pfizer trial, 8 out of 18,198 people who were given the vaccine developed COVID-19. In the unvaccinated placebo group, 162 people got it, which means that even without the vaccine, the risk of contracting COVID-19 was extremely low at 0.88%, which the vaccine then reduced to 0.04%. So the net benefit, or the absolute risk reduction that you're being offered with a Pfizer vaccine, is 0.84%. That 95% number, that refers to the relative difference between 0.88 and 0.04%. That's what they call 95% relative risk reduction. And relative risk reduction is well known to be a misleading number, which is why the FDA recommends using absolute risk reduction instead. Which begs the question, how many people would have chosen to take the COVID-19 vaccines had they understood that they offered less than 1% benefit? You're entitled to know the risks and side effects. In Canada, any potentially serious risk must be disclosed.
And that's from Tom and Lauren Health. You guys can look at the various social media channels that they have. They put a lot of things like this. Mirrors what we've done in prior episodes where we talk about the relative risk
extensively.
of drugs, right? What a scam. If you think if they had an ad, if you think Dr. Fauci had come on almost every night on TV saying, if you take this vaccine, you can reduce your risk of getting COVID by less than 1%. How many of these drugs do you think they would have sold?
Yeah, none. If Fauci would have said, "Hey, your chances of getting COVID are 0.088%, and with the vaccine it's 0.04%," people would be like, "Screw that! I don't need to get a vaccine and wait in line and pay money and who knows what else." It is just unbelievable.
Look, a lot of this is an outright scam. That's the problem. And that's what RFK Jr. is trying to change. He's trying to put in a framework because he's been suing drug companies and all these entities for years and years. So he has experience doing this. And he's seen behind the curtain. He knows what's going on. And he's trying to make somewhat of an effort to change this forever. Because in the United States, most people have no idea. And for all the poor people, for the millions and millions and millions of people who got vaccinated, who may now have serious health effects, okay, and would have probably not taken the vaccination if they knew that one, that the drug makers knew that there were potential risks that they didn't properly disclose, and number two, that the drug makers were not lying, but they were giving relative risk numbers which are blatantly misleading as to the benefit of these vaccines. I agree with you. Virtually no one would have agreed to take these things, and a small sliver of the population that was older, sicker, this and that, had what they call comorbidities, other issues, might have benefited, but not a blanket thing, and certainly not our young children. That was just so wrong. And back to this thing, it's like the insurance companies, the drug makers, it's all similar, right? It's all connected. And ultimately that's the sad part. And the food industry is probably no better. It's part of the puzzle too. It's another puzzle piece. What are your thoughts? What, in a couple of words, what do you think the state of American healthcare is?
I think just like what you said earlier, the people we saw earlier making those votes on if to approve the vaccine or not, they are in the pockets. Most of them are work for or are funded by, or their next job will be for some of these drug makers. So the people who, until at least RFK came into office, the people in charge of who were supposed to care about our safety didn't care about our safety whatsoever. They cared mostly about lining their own pockets. And I think the United States healthcare system is a huge scam. Basically, it causes thousands of people to go bankrupt. It causes probably hundreds of people to commit suicide just because of the sheer costs involved that are completely made up and are not based on any on any objective cost structure or analysis or anything like that. It's just like what's the maximum we can bill? And since most of healthcare expenses are ultimately paid by the US taxpayer, and that's crazy because the US doesn't have open healthcare for everybody, right? So we don't have a free healthcare, but through Medicare and Medicaid and all the other federal grants and stuff like that, the US spends on healthcare more than almost all other countries combined in the world combined. Yet those countries offer healthcare for all of their citizens and we get nothing. Instead, anytime you go to the hospital for the shortest thing, for a few hour visit, everything's okay, you're still left with a bill of $15,000 or something. And if you have an insurance company, your insurance company is working with the hospital to scam you too. So the insurance companies are not on your side. They're there to work with the hospitals and the drug manufacturers to screw you over. Now, like we discussed in the past, you can find a part or something, and your insurance will say, "Hey, great job! Instead of $1,600, it's only $800. We'll cover the other $800." And you're like, "$800? That's a great deal." And then you look online, and it costs $200. And then if you go to the manufacturer's website, it costs maybe. If you go to Amazon, it costs $120. And if you look at like third-party options that are not brand named, it's like $60. And you were just left with an $800 bill, being told that you got the sickest deal because your insurance covered the other $800. When in reality, from the manufacturer's website, it costs $200. On Amazon, it costs $120, and the Chinese copy costs $60. So the whole system is just rigged, unfortunately.
Yeah, and ultimately, I would describe it as in this way. Having experienced both the Canadian, at least a couple of Canadian provincial healthcare systems, and versus the United States, Canada's biggest downfall is because the government's running it. It's unbelievably inefficient and very limiting, and it's getting worse and worse. Certainly in a number of provinces where they're literally encouraging people to be euthanized. It's just that's something I definitely would like to cover in more detail, just for ethical reasons in another episode. But it's just like insane. Like they can't even afford to care for their patients, so they're encouraging them just to end their lives. That's number one. In places like the United Kingdom, where if you're over a certain age, you're exempt from eligibility for so many treatments because they just say you're not eligible. You're too old, too bad, so sad. And
it's not a smart investment to spend
yeah,
$1
just
million if you're 95 years old and about to die anyways.
Yeah, no, there's all these things. And in the United States, it's prioritizing profit. Recently, a large insurance company was caught essentially encouraging nursing homes to not send patients to the hospital, okay, to the detriment of the care of those patients. And they would get bonused for following the instructions of the insurance company. All that being said, it's no different with our food industry. We've covered that, and we will continue to cover that in other episodes, where much of the food we have has serious problems. It has almost no nutritional value. As of the last couple of weeks, there's talk of now all the food dyes, in large part, or the worst ones, being removed from foods in the United States voluntarily before it's made into a law. But that's just one tiny piece of the puzzle. The added sugar, the added artificial sweeteners, all the seed oils, which are chemical petroleum-based products, essentially. Ultimately, there's so much more to do. And the hope is that RFK Jr. will continue to push forward and accomplish some of this, because that's what everybody's rooting for. We want there to be an improvement in the quality of our food. But as you often probably joke about, when I go into a grocery store, what I see is maybe different what other people see. This is an example of what I see when I go there and how I act.
Potassium bromate! This supermarket is... You! Potassium bromate, do you know what that is? Are you okay, sir? It is known to induce renal cell tumors, methotheliomas of the peritoneum.
Can I call someone for you?
Call someone. You know what you're putting into our bodies? Death! Delicious strawberry flavored death!
Okay, I'm calling security.
Yes!
Strawberry flavored death! That could be me. It's not me, but not good. And he's mentioning one or two things that are in there. Listen, think about it. If you go into a store and they have the health food department and it's a little tiny aisle, if that's the health food department, which probably has garbage in it anyways, but let's assume that has some healthy food, what does the 98% of the remaining store become? The garbage food department?
Yeah.
And that's the thing we need to think about. The whole grocery store should be healthy.
A lot of the food isn't really healthy.
Yeah, no, and again, so that is one of the other major pieces of the puzzle between the pharmaceutical industry, the insurance company, and the healthcare system itself. The nutrition component and the food component, big food, I guess as you'd call it, is the same thing.
Watch what you eat, ask questions before taking a prescription drug, and join in on the conversation by watching our other clips and shorts and the entire episode 16 of the Yojo Show podcast.